Upon being released on parole, a former wealthy woman got a job as a cleaner at a financial company. And when she accidentally walked into an important meeting, she shocked everyone. Number 111, Jill Atwood, to the exit, boomed the guard. Well, goodbye, Jill hugged her cellmate. Goodbye, don't get caught again, friend, she patted Jill on the back. Don't trust anyone. Jill laughed. Cora. That was her new life motto. Funny girl, incredibly smart. She used to be the chief accountant at a company. Daylight blinded Jill, who had grown accustomed to the perpetual gloom of the prison corridors and her cell, where she had spent nearly 2 of her 3-year sentence. The air, though not very fresh, finally filled her lungs. How wonderful! Freedom! Jill rejoiced inwardly as she walked away from the dilapidated prison building. There was no one to meet her. In her backpack, she had $500 precious. That was all she had left, aside from a few gold jewelry pieces. Jill didn't know where to go. She had no home, although her business had started to gain momentum. The tattoo parlor owner hadn't rushed to get an apartment. She rented a small place in the city center, just a stone's throw from the tattoo parlor. The salon went to pay off a loan, and it had to be sold quickly at a reduced price. And to whom? That scoundrel Josh Neville. Jill didn't even have time to figure out where to store her things. A once successful young businesswoman had turned into a pauper with no relatives, friends, or connections, but with a criminal record on her ID. Not much of a kid, but Jill Atwood had no choice. She wandered the streets with her backpack on her shoulder, completely at a loss for what to do. Jill realized that city life was no longer for her, and she needed to sort out her housing situation. The thought came naturally, she needed to go back to her hometown, the town of her childhood and youth. It was 3 hours by bus from the capital. Jill Atwood didn't know what she would do there, but it seemed some unknown force was pulling her back. She was even surprised at herself for deciding on such a step. After all, there was no one there. Jill's parents had gone on their next trip to Africa. They were naturalist researchers 5 years ago and were still considered missing. Their daughter had tried to find them, spending a lot of money on the investigation, but to no avail. Yes, back then, she had money. Her cellmate even called her rich. Such a well-groomed look and a firm gaze, Cora had said during their first meeting. She got 5 years. The tax inspection came unexpectedly. The boss didn't manage to hide the traces of his machinations and pinned everything on the chief accountant. He remained clean, getting away with a fine, while she got caught. Her sister Kia was sent to an orphanage as they had no other relatives. Jill liked Cora. Yes, a bit reserved, yes, always acting like a know-it-all, but she wouldn't betray you and would go to the end. She felt sorry for Kia, her younger sister. She must be about 11 now, Jill thought. She had sworn, if she ever got out of this pit, she would definitely help Cora and her sister. But would she manage to get out? She would have to start all over again. At 26, one sometimes has to start anew, as if there had been no success, no business, no bright hopes for the future. And yet, Jill had planned to marry Brandon. They had even discussed where they would go for their honeymoon. But this man quickly changed his mind when he found out what trouble his girlfriend was in. He disappeared as suddenly as he had appeared in her life. Jill quickly bought a ticket. The bus was leaving in just 10 minutes. She took her seat at the very back and stared out the window. The weather began to deteriorate sharply, the sky darkened, as if angry at everyone around, and a nasty drizzle started. Autumn was asserting its rights, pushing summer out, depriving it of the right to establish its own rules, striving to imprison it. Jill felt sleepy, her eyelids grew heavy, her head began to tilt to the side. Familiar faces floated before her eyes. There was her friend Arya Young in her favorite denim shorts and white t-shirt with a black sequin heart. They had been such good friends. They were ready to share everything, never fought, and always found something to do. But one day their friendship ended. The reason was the most trivial: they didn't share a boy. Jill started dating Paul, But Arya somehow took it as a personal insult, even though she had never said she liked the guy. That's when it all started. It ended quickly, though, because Jill left to conquer the capital. She heard that Arya started dating Paul, but she knew nothing about their further life and didn't seek to find out. Arya didn't show up either, not trying to renew her connection with her best friend. Jill got caught up in city life, first studying, then working, and finally opening the tattoo parlor. Everything happened so quickly. Jill was proud of herself. At 24, she already owned a rather profitable business. What saddened her was her parents' disappearance. If it weren't for that, Jill Atwood would have achieved success much earlier and much better. After all, a lot of money went into searching for them, and focusing on work was extremely difficult when the most beloved and close people were missing and no one knew what had happened to them. And there was the culprit of their falling out, Paul Moore. This guy literally drove Jill crazy. She didn't understand what it was about him that hooked her. Probably because he was himself, didn't try to look better, wasn't a hypocrite, and it was fun and very calm with him. Paul didn't stage scenes, didn't write passionate messages, he just directly said that it was time to meet or suggested something, asking if she could. When Jill was leaving, Paul took the news calmly. Not indifferently, but just as a matter of course. "I wish you to conquer the capital, baby," he said goodbye. "See you." Brandon. Brandon was completely different. He sought out meetings with her, ready to rush from one end of the city to the other just to see her and kiss her. He talked about marriage, children, a big house with a garden, their boundless happiness. But all of that quickly stopped interesting him, and for Jill, it remained just an unfulfilled dream. He didn't even call her to see how she was, he just disappeared, vanished into thin air as if he had never been in her life, as if those passionate conversations and fervent kisses, those sleepless nights full of passion and fire, had never existed. Sad, very sad. Mom and Dad appeared in Jill's mind like a flash of joy and immense love. "Where are you?" she thought, as the bus rocked steadily down the highway. Her parents had always been her best friends, supporting her and not scolding her without understanding the situation first. Now Jill couldn't even continue her search. She had no money at all. Jill woke up from her nap when the bus came to a sudden stop. They had arrived. Hello, dreary little town. The town of childhood hopes and youthful aspirations. Taxi? Jill heard when she got off the bus at the small bus station and looked around a bit. What? She glanced at the girl standing nearby. "I can give you a ride wherever you need to go," the girl said cheerfully. "If I knew where I needed to go," Jill muttered sadly. "Running from the past? Bullseye. But I have no idea where to run next or what to do with just $500 in my pocket." $500 isn't that bad. Want me to set you up with a room? It's in a dorm, though, but better than a park bench. I won't charge much. And you seem decent, even if you're running from something. I'm Lily," the girl extended her hand. "Jill," the weary traveler said, shaking her hand in return. "Let's go." "I'll give you a lift as a bonus." Lily abruptly turned and headed to her parked old Toyota Vitz. They spoke little on the way, exchanging just a few phrases. "What about work? Do you need a job?" "I do, but not everyone will hire me." "Have you been in jail?" Lily smirked. "Yeah. But don't get me wrong, I didn't do anything bad. It was pure slander. I did time for nothing, but couldn't prove it. It's a lousy situation, Lily. You probably won't want to rent me a room now, right? I understand. Forget it. I almost ended up behind bars once myself. If it weren't for my uncle, I'd probably still be there. And just like you said, completely innocent, without any guilt. And what job are you talking about? Is it legal, I hope? I'm on good terms with the law, sweetie, so everything's legit. The place isn't fancy, but they pay regularly. The dorm I'm taking you to is a block away from a financial company. They're looking for a manager." Lily snorted. "Just kidding. They need a cleaner, or as my uncle, who works there as a guard, says, a cleanliness elf. Nice way to put it, Jill chuckled. He's quite the storyteller. Yeah, Uncle Jim is always coming up with something. I adored him as a kid, and still do. And where do you work? Jill asked, glancing out the window. Everything looked pretty bleak, though she noticed significant changes in her hometown. Some shacks had been torn down and replaced with 4-story brick buildings with small balconies. For the first time, Jill regretted selling their apartment when she moved to the capital and her parents went on their expedition, as they called their trip. Now, that apartment would be more useful than ever. Now she had to live in some dump and scrub floors and toilets in some office, even if it was a financial one, and that's if they hired her. In a flower shop, Lily replied, sharply turning the steering wheel. We're here. The dormitory was old. It was surprising it hadn't been demolished yet. Mostly lonely old people lived there. Like a nursing home, Jill thought, climbing the worn steps to the second floor. My room is cool, Lily said proudly, unlocking the door. It has a shower. I had to pull some strings to get it. Lucky it's a corner room. The toilet is nearby, almost opposite. So you're pretty lucky, Jill. Thanks, Lily. I'll pay for 2 months up front, okay? I hope they hire me. I'll go there first thing in the morning. I'll tell Uncle Jim to put in a good word for you. Get settled in, and if you need anything, call me. Did you write down my number? Yeah, thanks again, Lily. Jill dropped her backpack on the chair and collapsed onto the bed. She had been sleeping terribly for several nights, pondering how to live and what to do next. Jill began drifting off into sleep when she heard a message notification in the distance. Lily wrote that Uncle Jim had already put in a good word for her. They were expecting her at 9 tomorrow. God is on my side, Jill Atwood thought, sending hug emojis to her savior before falling into a dreamless sleep. What was the conviction for? Asked the short-haired woman in HR. Long story. Let's say I didn't agree to the terms of one businessman, so he set me up. Did 2 years for nothing. The interviewer looked somewhat skeptical. You don't believe me, do you? Jill shifted slightly in her chair. I could tell you my story, but it's long. You're probably too busy. I like stories, and I'm not in a hurry today. The bosses are in some meeting anyway. Tell me, Miss Atwood. Just Jill is fine. And you can call me Diana, or Dee. Jill felt a bit uneasy telling her whole ordeal to a complete stranger, but she wanted to for some reason. Probably because she had been holding in the pain she felt, not knowing who to share it with to feel at least a little better. Jill had told her cellmate Cora everything, but it wasn't quite the same, especially in a prison cell where everything reminded you that you had to stay there for a long time. Back then, Jill tried to fend off any dark thoughts by drawing and reading. Jill was going to become an architect. She had been good at drawing since childhood and was great at drafting in school. However, she didn't get into university, missing by just a few points. Not one to despair when faced with setbacks, Jill enrolled in courses that promised to make her a skilled tattoo artist and provide certification. She started doing side jobs during her training, sketching tattoos and creating catalogs for clients, earning a small amount of money for her efforts. Jill's career took off immediately. After working as a tattoo artist for only a year and a half, she began thinking about starting her own business. She trained those she wanted as masters in her salon. Soon, her business started generating a stable and quite decent income. Jill took out a loan and bought a place. Everything was wonderful until Josh Neville appeared. It was unclear why he was so interested in the cozy tattoo salon Jill Atwood had set up, but he began asking her to sell it to him. Jill refused, but he didn't give up. First, he asked, then demanded, and finally started threatening her. Jill stood her ground, threatening to call the police if Josh didn't stop harassing her. She calmly told him this while sitting across from him over a cup of coffee in her office. He smiled oddly and left. That evening, a raid took place. The police informed her that a complaint had been filed by Mr. Neville, who felt very ill after drinking a cup of coffee in Jill Atwood's office. In a cabinet where tea, sugar, and various syrups were stored, they found a strange cloth bag with a smiley face on it, which was taken for analysis. It turned out to be a powder made from dried deathcap mushrooms. Worse yet, a revolver was found in the bottom drawer of Jill's desk. Jill was arrested. Her salon had to be sold at a low price to pay off the loan. Jill tried to prove that someone had planted the bag of mushrooms and the unregistered weapon on her. Clearly, Josh Neville had a hand in all this, as he had connections everywhere. Before she knew it, Jill was being led to a prison cell. Thus, she went from being a successful young woman to a penniless, stigmatized beggar with a criminal record, without money, business, or loved ones. "Well, you've had a rough time, kid," Diana sighed. "Want some tea?" Jill nodded, barely holding back tears in the office where she and Diana sat. "You can fill out the application now." Diana pushed a form and a pen toward Jill. "Does this mean you're hiring me?" Jill asked hopefully. "Yes, it means you start your duties tomorrow. Let's have some tea with blueberry pie, and I'll show you what needs to be done. Oh, and you'll get a uniform." "Thank you, Dee. I've had such bad luck lately. First, Lily rented me a room in her dorm, and now you. I won't let you down. Everything will be spotless." Jill had been working as a cleaner for a week at a finance company with the grand name Financial Balance. It was hard, of course, going from a managerial position to this, but she hoped it was temporary and that she'd soon find a better job. Something had to happen to help her escape the downward spiral that had started more than 2 years ago. Jill believed in this; she had no choice. It was this faith in a better future that always saved this determined girl and helped her persevere. Jill hoped to one day prove her innocence once she had the money for a good lawyer. She understood that it was nearly impossible to get a decent job with a criminal record, and a cleaner was unlikely to save up much. But Jill tried to push away these negative thoughts, otherwise she could go mad. That day, there were important negotiations planned. It was about funding one of 2 projects, and the businessmen had to prove the profitability of their programs. Diana had explained the situation. She didn't understand such matters well. Her job was to recruit staff and ensure everything ran smoothly in that regard. The building was quiet. Jill was watering the plants near the conference room. There was a heated discussion behind the door, and one voice stood out. It was breaking at times, typical of nervous people. Suddenly, everything went silent, the door opened, and out came, yes, it was none other than Josh Neville. He walked by, swinging his black leather briefcase. His face was flushed, and a few strands of thin hair clung to his sweaty forehead. "What is he doing here?" Jill's skin crawled, and her hands grew cold. Without realizing it, she headed straight for the room where the negotiations had just taken place. She pulled the heavy door towards her. Everyone at the table turned and stared at her. "Excuse me," Jill began timidly. "I didn't mean to interrupt, but this is very important. The man who just left, he is a real fraud. He had me imprisoned just to buy the office my tattoo salon was in. He will stop at nothing. It's best not to deal with him at all." Jill spoke incoherently, unable to find the right words. She understood she was taking a huge risk and could easily be fired. Who was she? Just a cleaner, supposed to scrub floors, dust, and water plants. "What are you saying, Jill?" Mr. Thompson, the biggest boss in the place, asked in surprise. "It's true, Mr. Thompson. I spent 2 years in prison because of that man. He somehow planted poisonous mushrooms in my tattoo parlor's cabinet and a revolver in my desk drawer. I used to own it, but then..." Tears welled up in her eyes. "Frankly, that gentleman seemed quite shady to me," said a man Jill had never seen before. "Jill, we understand. We'll look into it. Don't worry. You can go now." "We have." There was a knock at the door, and another businesslike man with a folder entered. "Excuse me, may I come in?" He smiled at everyone present. Yes, Mr. Young, come in, have a seat," the boss invited. Mr. Young walked past Jill, who was about to leave. Something about his face seemed vaguely familiar, but she couldn't quite place it. "Jill? Jill Atwood?" Mr. Young suddenly turned and asked. "Wait for me." Jill nodded and left the office. She remembered it was Stephen Young, Arya's brother, her best friend. He was 6 years older and always called them kids. Jill used to call him a pimply guitarist in return. As a teenager, Stephen had indeed suffered from acne and always carried around his old guitar, which he had inherited from his grandfather. "Wow, he's really made it," Jill admired, remembering why he was there and how impressive he looked now. She decided to wait for him, especially since her workday was almost over. She wanted to ask about Arya and just talk to someone from her past life. Maybe that wasn't the only reason? But Jill pushed away unnecessary thoughts as usual and continued watering the large potted palms. "Jill, what brings you here?" "I heard you were doing well in the capital," she heard close by and flinched in surprise. "Yes, Stephen, but that was then. Now." Her lips trembled. "Have you finished? Can we go for a walk and chat?" "Yes, wait for me outside. I'll change and be right out." "All right, I'll wait." Stephen headed for the exit. They sat in a cafe near the Financial Balance and enjoyed a cool lemon ginger smoothie. Jill recounted everything that had happened to her over the past few years. Arya's brother listened very attentively. "Life has really put you through the ringer, Jill." Steve took her hand. For some reason, tiny goosebumps ran all over Jill's body, as if she had been sprinkled with soft, tender sand. It was so pleasant to sit at a cafe table with this gallant young man and chat so freely, without hiding anything, without making anything up. "Can you imagine? I've lost everything, my parents, my business, even my reputation, Steve." Jill smiled bitterly. "Now I'm living in a dump and working as a cleaner. The dream of every 26-year-old girl, right?" "Jill, you're amazing. You haven't lost your sense of humor even in this situation. You can consider your troubles over. Now I'm here, and Arya too. She literally lived your life all these years. She followed you on social media." "No way. I thought she hated me. Or at least didn't care about me. By the way, how are things with Paul?" "You know, let's go. You can ask her yourself. We live 5 minutes away from the city. But it's inconvenient showing up like this after several years, especially since we had a terrible fight back then." "Jill, please. Why do you keep remembering those ancient times? Arya often thinks about you and regrets fighting with you." "Really?" Jill looked straight into Steve's eyes. He was still holding her hand, now squeezing it a bit tighter. "Of course, Jill. I haven't forgotten Arya for a minute either. I've missed her so much all these years, especially in prison." "You know, I didn't get denied funding for my project," Steve said cheerfully. "What project?" Jill looked at Steve with interest. "I want to organize something like a center for children from orphanages, so they can better socialize and understand what life is, that bread and vegetables don't grow somewhere in the supply room." "That's amazing. You're so noble, Steve, it's really touching." Jill involuntarily remembered Cora and her little sister, who had been languishing in an orphanage for about 3 years. And Cora still had about 2 years left behind bars. They stopped near a neat house with a tiled roof. It felt like it was built out of cookies. Such an unusual material, either small bricks or something entirely innovative. "Just like a fairy tale," said Jill. "That's Arya. She wanted something unusual, like in children's book illustrations." "I really like it." Jill opened the car door and slipped out. "Let's go. We'll surprise Arya." They went inside. Everything in this house breathed something magical. Arya had always been imaginative. Jill remembered that her friend was always creating something, even asking her to draw some pictures for her fairy tales and parables. A 4-year-old girl ran down from the second floor. "Uncle Steve, I drew our house," she chattered excitedly. "And who's this?" she asked, staring at Jill in surprise. "You'll find out soon, sweetie. Arya, come here quickly. I have a surprise for you." Arya appeared in a delicate greenhouse dress. She stood at the top step and looked at Jill in surprise, then covered her mouth with her hand and rushed down. "Jill? Jill Atwood?" she said quietly, tears in her eyes. "Arya" was all Jill could manage to say. They threw their arms around each other. Words became unnecessary. Friends who had been close since first grade, sharing everything, and then foolishly falling out over a boy, could finally hug each other. Everything else became distant and unimportant. It was just them. Here and now. "Lindsay and I will leave you," said Steve, picking up the little girl and heading upstairs. They sat on the open terrace and drank cold herbal tea. "Jill, I was such a fool. Forgive me. Things turned out so stupid with Paul back then." "Oh, come on, it was my fault too. I should have talked it over instead of leaving like that, without a word. How are things with Paul now?" "Are you kidding? We broke up almost immediately after I got pregnant." Arya poured a little more tea for her friend. "He abandoned you with a child while you were pregnant?" "No way. I kicked him out myself. He was so annoying. Not a man, but a useless rag. It's disgusting to even think about raising children with him, let alone just going for a walk." "Really? I thought he seemed nice." "You see, he was neither nice nor bad, he was just a zero. The worst part is that it suited him. He had no ambition at all. I think if we had to live in a dump, he would have accepted it as normal. Ugh. I don't even want to remember him. Better tell me about yourself. How's life in the capital? By the way, what brought you back to your hometown?" "Oh, Arya, my life was a roller coaster, hitting me from all directions," Jill laughed. "If you want, I'll tell you this long, tedious story. Do you even need to ask? I want to know everything about you. We haven't seen each other for ages. Tell me. I'm completely free until morning. Then listen. It's good that tomorrow is a day off, we can talk until morning." And Jill told her friend everything without holding back, with all the details. "That scumbag, you're Josh Neville. Don't worry, he'll get what's coming to him, no doubt. Nothing goes unpunished, nothing. When I saw that bastard, my heart almost stopped. Luckily, he didn't recognize me, or he wouldn't have missed the chance to torment his former tattoo salon owner. Good thing he was denied funding in favor of Steve." "Really? Steve got approved? I'm so happy. The orphans in our town will be much happier now. If my brother is taking on the task, it means everything will be great. I never suspected that Stephen Young would turn out to be such a noble knight. By the way, has he won the heart of any beauty yet?" "No. This truth seeker and peacemaker is still single. Moreover, he hasn't even had a serious relationship yet," Arya sighed. "Where are the girls looking?" Jill smiled. "As my brother says, he hasn't found the one who gives him goosebumps all over." "How does he put it?" "Like fine sand, or something." Jill shuddered. She felt that same sand when Stephen took her hand in the cafe. "Jill, are you okay?" Arya looked at her friend with concern. "Yes, I'm fine, everything's good." "And what are you up to? Raising your beautiful daughter?" "Not only that, I also edit photos. I take orders from photographers online. I don't want to live off Steve." "And your parents?" Jill asked cautiously. "Dad left Mom almost as soon as you left for the capital. Then she got sick. In 6 months, she turned into a talking skeleton and then quietly passed away. It was so hard, Jill, Just unbearable to watch the dearest person fade away before your eyes, and you can't do anything, absolutely nothing to help, nothing. Yes, I understand, Jill patted her friend's hand. Florence was so full of life, so cheerful. I remember her just like that. And your father? I know nothing about him. He just disappeared from our lives as if we were nobody to him. That's strange. And my parents went missing. Still no trace of them. When I could, I paid for searches, but then, Jill couldn't hold back her tears. They streamed down her face, hitting the smooth surface of the glass table they were sitting at. Jill, leave your dump and that job too. Live with us. We'll edit photos together. I can't handle all the work alone. Lindsay takes up almost all my time. I tried putting her in daycare, but it didn't work out. She had such tantrums that I couldn't bear to watch. She's a homebody. Oh, I offer you a nanny position. You were always great with kids. Remember, you were always fussing with the little ones when we were in school? Yes, I remember. But still, it feels wrong. You can't support me. It's hard for me to find a decent job now, but... You know, Jill, it's hard in the real world, but it's quite easy in the virtual one. I started taking orders on one freelance site. I'll tell you about it tomorrow, but now tell me, do you like Steve? In what sense? Jill's face flushed. In the literal sense, Jill. Arya smiled cheerfully. It seemed to me that he looks at you somehow special. So I thought. Oh, come on, Arya, we only met today, and even then by chance, Jill took a sip of herbal tea. You make this drink so wonderfully. Mom taught me. Arya looked at the night sky. I'm so glad Steve brought you here today. I missed you so much. It's okay, we'll make up for all the lost years. We'll always be together now. We're more than friends. We're sisters. They started a new life. Jill moved into the Youngs' house and quit her job. Now she was responsible for little Lindsay. She turned out to be a real handful, needing constant supervision. But she became the calmest child in the world when Jill painted her face or drew tattoos with a black gel pen while Arya wasn't looking. Arya would usually scold them for this mischief, emphasizing that it was terribly harmful to the child's body and to any body in general. They had to switch to special ink. Stephen was constantly away, dealing with issues related to the organization of a leisure center for orphans. Steve already managed one institution, a center for psychological help for children and their parents. Now he dreamed of creating something similar for children left without parental care. Ideally, he wanted to merge these two centers. Steve, one evening, as they were sitting on the terrace having tea, Jill began. I know a girl. She's currently in an orphanage because her sister, her only guardian, is behind bars. She still has about 2 years to serve. Can you? Well, somehow help get her transferred here. Then I could visit her and it would be easier for Cora. We can try. I can't promise anything, Jill, but I'll do my best. Children are sacred. You would be a very good father, Steve, Jill looked at him warmly. And you would be a wonderful mother. Lindsay adores you, even though she didn't let anyone near her before, even bit people. We just fool around together. I don't try to teach her anything or demand anything. And yet she talks about different things she didn't even know about before. That's all because of you. You just don't notice how you teach the girl about life. That's how it should be. I wouldn't be surprised if she learns to read this way. Lindsay can only read her name so far, Jill smiled. See? I told you. You're a super nanny. Steve looked into Jill's eyes and saw there an abyss into which he wanted to dive headfirst and lose himself in its depths. Jill, can I kiss you? Steve suddenly asked. She didn't answer, just closed her eyes and moved her face slightly closer to his. Jill woke up to someone tickling her feet. Lindsay, come here. She pulled her charge by the hand and started tickling her belly. Jilly, stop. I'm going to start hiccuping. The girl laughed. Did you and Steve get married? Why do you think that? Jill didn't understand. Because you're in his room. If they sleep in the same room, it means they're married, Lindsay said seriously. Only now did Jill realize that she was indeed in Steven's room. In his bed. Well. Do you know what happens to little curious girls? Jill made big scary eyes. Lindsay shook her head. They get eaten alive. Jill started nibbling on the girl's ear. Ah. Jilly. If you behave badly, I won't share my ice cream with you. Okay, Lindsay. I'll be good, Jill said meekly, folding her hands on her chest. Just don't deprive me of ice cream, please. The girl laughed and started tickling her nanny again. Steven performed a real miracle. Not only did he arrange for Kaya to be transferred to a local shelter, but he also obtained temporary custody of her while her sister was incarcerated. Now, the girl could live with them and attend the local school. Kaya blended so seamlessly into their family that it seemed she had lived there for years. Moreover, she turned out to be very smart and kind, just like her sister Cora. Our family is growing, Jill smiled, sitting on the bed where Steve was reading something on his tablet. Kaya is such a lovely girl. Thank you, Steve. You're one of a kind. Oh, you figured out my secret. I'm just a phantom, not a real person, Steven snickered and tugged Jill's hand. I propose we make this family even bigger. He looked at her with such tenderness that Jill felt a lump in her throat. What do you mean? Marry me, Jilly, Steve said simply. Though I didn't prepare a ring as I should have. Are you seriously willing to marry a girl with a criminal record? That's the only kind I'd consider, he laughed heartily. Steve, I love you so much, Jill's eyes filled with tears. You're like a prince from a fairy tale. Oh, come on. I snore. Soon, you'll buy earplugs, and then you'll smother me with a pillow just to stop hearing those awful sounds. Never heard you snore. You're just scared I'll say yes. Not at all, Jilly, Steve kissed her. It was an unusual kiss, not a kiss of passion, not a kiss of love, but a familiar, homely kiss. So, do you agree? Yes, Snorer, I agree. Be careful, or I might slip you some poison, Jill teased. Time to get an antidote. Tomorrow, we'll visit the pharmacy, you for earplugs, and I for the antidote. A great start to married life. Jill was waiting for Kaya with Lindsay near the school, holding her 1-year-old son, Ted. He was trying to pull off his mom's cap and laughing merrily. Jill's phone rang. Jill Atwood, she heard an unfamiliar woman's voice. Yes, that's me. Who's this? I'm calling about your parents, who went missing several years ago. We've found them. Or rather, they've been found. They're in a clinic undergoing examination. Are they okay? Are they healthy? What happened? How can I get them? Jill bombarded the caller with questions. I'll send you the address of the clinic where they are. As I understand, they lived in some tribe all these years. They were taken captive, but your parents are fine. No injuries or anything like that. Soon, you'll be able to see them and bring them home. Jill's heart was ready to jump out of her chest. She quickly messaged Steven and sent him the clinic's address. He replied that he would bring these travelers home today. Just then, the girls appeared on the school porch. Ted clapped his hands joyfully upon seeing them. Jill hurried to the car, greeting the girls as she passed. Mom. Dad. Jill ran down the porch, almost tripping over the mat. Oh my God. I thought I'd never see you again. She hugged both her parents at once. Jilly. Sweetie, her mom sobbed loudly. Her father silently stroked his daughter's hair. That evening, there were many tears, conversations, and joyful exclamations. They drank several jugs of Arya's famous herbal tea before moving on to stronger drinks. We'll build a house, her rather tipsy father suddenly announced. A house? Jill was surprised. With what money? With the money in my account, daughter. Do you think we worked hard all these years for nothing? We were well paid. We brought back a lot of valuable information from the expedition. And information, my dear, is expensive these days. It's enough for a house with a garden and a small fountain. A fountain? Will there be fish in it? Lindsay asked excitedly. Lindsay, fish can't live in a fountain, Kaya responded seriously. It's not a pond. Then we need a pond, Lindsay said, nodding amusingly. Is there enough for a pond? She looked intently at Mr. Atwood. I think there is, he smiled. After a while, Cora was released and came to get her sister. Cora, let's stay in this town, Kaya said after hugging her older sister for a long time. It's so nice here. Jill, Arya, Steve, Lindsay, and Teddy are all here. Let's sell our apartment and move here. You know, our school is very good. We have a great math teacher. Kaya, what's with math teacher? It's mathematics teacher, duh. I know. She's better at math than you. Thanks, sis. What a compliment. Cora, I think your sister is right. What's there for you in the capital? With our past. Jill smiled slyly and winked at her friend. Yeah. It's hard to find a job now. Cora, is that you talking? Kaya giggled. I'd like to see you after serving my sentence, Cora smirked. I'll think about moving. I'm unlikely to get a good job now. By the way, Steve said they need an accountant. You could handle 2 centers, Jill took Cora's hand. Everything will be fine, girl. Don't worry. And don't listen to ex-convicts chatting. Jill threw a plush bunny at Kaya. Oh, you too, I'd rather go see what Arya is cooking. Kaya headed to the kitchen. Really? Are you serious about the accountant? Cora stared at Jill. Of course, I am. You can ask Steve yourself. He's been struggling to find a good specialist. And he's not bothered by the fact that you served 5 years? Not at all. If you didn't know, he's married to someone just like you. Right. Thank you, Jill. Thank you for everything, especially for my sister. Tears welled up in Cora's eyes. Stop it, I couldn't have done otherwise. I swore when I left those gates that I would help you if I managed to get out of that pit. I kept my promise, girl. Jill playfully poked Cora in the side. So many years wasted, Jill, Cora said sadly. You know, my grandma, who was a very wise old lady, said that nothing happens for no reason. Everything teaches us something, shows us something, protects us from something, and prepares us for something. So, live, Cora. Everything will be fine now. We will all be just fine. Hey, beauties, come to dinner. Arya appeared in the living room doorway. They're having secrets here, leaving me to the mercy of hungry kids, she pouted playfully. Thank you, Arya, Cora hugged her. For what, Cora? She patted her back. You can thank me after tasting the chicken and sweet and sour sauce with pickled mushrooms. Sounds delicious. Jill darted towards the kitchen. Hub longer, we'll eat everything, she turned and stuck out her tongue. Jill. Stop, you Colorado beetle. Arya rushed after her, pulling Cora by the hand. Why Colorado beetle? She asked, laughing. Oh, Jill had this shirt as a kid. She hated it, but her mom made her wear it. So, Jill complained she looked like a Colorado beetle in that shirt. The nickname stuck. The 3 of them ran into the kitchen. There, Steve, with Ted on his shoulders, was carving the chicken while the girls argued over who would get the crispy wings. The smell was so tantalizing that everyone's stomachs started to growl. It smelled like a home where loving people live. It smelled like true happiness.